thing that's been so disturbing to me is that when mold exposure is taking place, especially early on, pregnancy, first year, second year, third year of life, you get these sets of imbalances that then cause the entire human system to falter depending on the genetics.
Can mold be one of the main causes of disease in children?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And I was in the same boat. So started in functional medicine, holistic medicine in 2008. And over the years, we were taught the gut is the key piece, right? So I got into the elimination diets and supplements and so forth. And like a few of my kids, let's say 30%, 40% of the kids would get better, and then a whole bunch were still stuck. And all of this has really been to try to find that root cause, right? That main thing that triggers it. And over the years, the thing that's been so disturbing to me is that when mold exposure is taking place, especially early on, pregnancy, first year, second year, third year of life, you get these sets of imbalances that then cause the entire human system to falter depending on the genetics. Severe cases of eczema, like we're talking peel your skin off eczema. Severe cases of asthma, end up in the hospital, multiple ER visits. Horrendous cases of ADHD where these poor kids cannot function for the life of them. I've seen some cases of autism, what we're calling pans and pandas, where these kids are just freaking out, like can't regulate themselves. And the reason why I'm appreciative to be having this discussion is it keeps showing up over and over again in all kinds of different ways, to the point where you stand back, you're like, how in God's good earth can all of these things be tied to this one thing? And that's why I'm thankful that we're having this.
When we spoke on the phone before the show, I had mentioned I suffered with mold, and I know exactly what it did to my system, but I have never went into the realm of children and mold exposure. But to think, wow, like it can be leading to things like full body eczema, hospitalizations because of asthma. And when you said that, I thought back when we had a water pipe break in New Jersey in my home, and it flooded the basement, the whole downstairs. And about a year later, my brother went into the hospital with pneumonia. And it was antibiotic resistant, and they would try 2 rounds of antibiotics, and he was in really bad shape. And just thinking about, wow, it might have been the overload of mold over and over. His buffering capacity, as you mentioned, that I want to talk about, just broke.
Yeah.
So when kids are in the home and they're being exposed to mold, are there any signs from the get-go that we need to be paying attention to before it starts getting really bad?
So sometimes it shows up as just subtle things, like a little bit of congestion, the kid that keeps getting sick often, right? And it's funny because in the medical community, we just say, well, all kids just get sick all the time. And there is truth that, preschools and schools are cesspools and kids get sick. But the reality is that if a child has a healthy immune system, they get a cold, lasts a day or two, if they even get sick at all, and then they move on. The kids that are exposed to mold, typically, one, their immune systems are weakened. And part of that is when you look at what these mold toxins do, they're actually immunosuppressants. So to put that in context, there are medications they use for heart transplants, cyclosporin being one of them, where they suppress the immune system enough where this foreign organ can sit in the body. Yeah. Cyclosporin is a mold derivative. So these mycotoxins are potentially very hardcore immunosuppressants to the point where white blood cell counts can get suppressed. And I've seen that in some of my patients. 10 to 20% of the mold kids actually have lowered white blood cells to the point where you see it on the lab. So you get this weakened immune system that is incapable of handling these infectious insults. So you get this illness, and then the illness just keeps lingering. And parents are like, what the hell is going on? Why is my kid sick, from cough and congestion for weeks on end, and they get better and then they get sick again, and they get better and they get sick again. So there's this illness, there are allergies, bronchitis, where 6-year-olds just have this phlegmy, wet cough that doesn't make sense. A lot of times that shows up in the adults as well. But it goes beyond just the immunological allergy symptoms. And that's where things get really troubling.
So here's one of my favorite supplements out there. It's MitoPure. And up until now, there hasn't been many supplements out there on the market that actually support mitophagy. This is the breaking down of old mitochondria, right? The recycling, the getting rid of all of the damaged stuff out there. This is the process of flushing out and getting rid of old damaged mitochondria. Now, when I discovered a while ago urolithin A, I was super intrigued, but there wasn't any supplements out there except really coming from food, pomegranate, but it's nearly impossible to eat so many pomegranates to get that therapeutic dose that we see in the science. So there's a product called MitoPure from Timeline Nutrition, and that's where it comes in. They created 3 easy, delicious ways to get your daily dose of 500 milligrams of urolithin A, and it's in their product, MitoPure. What I use is a soft gels, and it's in a frosted container, super easy for travel. This is one of the few supplements that I use every single day. And what I notice is a clean form of energy. It's not peaking all the way up and then crashing me down. It's sustained throughout the day. So you're not having those dips, especially in the afternoon. So MitoPure is the first product that offers a precise dose of urolithin A and upgrades your mitochondrial function. And they have randomized controlled trials that show that it improves muscle strength and endurance. Really amazing stuff. As we age, our mitochondria breaks down. So over the age of 30, you want to make sure you're supporting it. Timeline is offering 10% off of your first order of MitoPure. Go to timelinenutrition.com/DRG and use the code DRG to get 10% off. That's Timeline Nutrition, TimeLineNutrition.com/DRG. I recommend trying their starter pack with all 3 formats. Let me tell you something. Sleep is one of the most powerful factors to upgrade your health. Great sleep upgrades you on virtually every level: the body fat, the muscle mass, the mood, the brain function, and countless other ways. You know this already. However, taking melatonin all the time may be problematic for some people. One, you might not wake up restful like you got a good night's sleep, because melatonin tends to put people in a really groggy state when we wake up. But also, your body can really adapt to it over time, making it less and less effective. Now, there's a really good approach out there, and that's utilizing what I love, the cofactors, the building blocks together to help produce your body's own natural melatonin. And now BioOptimizers has a fantastic sleep formula. It's really strong. I actually use a quarter to half of the formula because I'm particularly sensitive to it, but I'm out. I'm knocked out. I'm sleeping through the night, I'm waking up and I'm feeling refreshed. And it is the sleep breakthrough formula. They did years of trial and error and sleep tracking, and they finally launched this groundbreaking formula. It's amazing. Sleep Breakthrough is a delicious sleep drink that supports your natural melatonin production and relaxation without creating that dependency that people have or that grogginess that we have when we wake up. Now, it targets 5 different sleep pathways, 5 to help you have your best sleep ever. So you're gonna fall asleep in minutes, you're gonna stay asleep, and best of all, what happens is you're waking up feeling rested and rejuvenated. So for an exclusive offer to you, the Heal Thyself listener, go to sleepbreakthrough.com/DRG. In addition to the discount you get by using the promo code DRG10, you can unlock special gifts with purchase with retail values of at least $20. So this is a limited time offer for select orders. Go to sleepbreakthrough.com/DRG right now to get the best night's sleep.
We see the attention problems, the nervous system being hit, the energy being wiped out. There are these kids that are just very weak, like they're just run down. They just, it's like that all the time. And we say, oh, she's so cute. She just sits there and plays quietly all the time. Whereas a child's tendency, yes, there are kids like my daughter who do like the creative play. But when they have robust energy, they also want to run and they want to do all of these other things.
And we think about how it basically takes the life force out of you.
Yes.
Right? That energy that we see in children that is nonstop while suppressing the immune system, while causing, and I'm happy you mentioned it, the behavioral issues, which is where I want to go. What is mold doing to the brain? What is it doing to the body that it's causing behavioral issues in children? And then when they go to school, they're diagnosed with ADHD or they're diagnosed with a behavioral issue, mood disorders, and given medication. What happens in the brain of a child when there's mold that is abundant in the house?
How far down the rabbit hole you want to go?
Rabbit hole. Let's go. Real. And people need to hear the real.
All right. So first thing I want to touch on is exactly what you said. Mold wipes out vitality. And if there's one thing for people to think about and walk away from is if your vitality, your kid's vitality is just drained, it's sucked, and it's just that life force, as you touched on, is missing. The kid's color is lacking. They're kind of pale. They've got dark circles. They're just dragging themselves throughout the day. There could be a number of things, but one of the things to think about is mold. As far as the nervous system, you first have to kind of understand what are the pillars that hold up the nervous system. Because, we think of this thing as just this thing, right? It's just this little hodgepodge of goo that sits in our skull, right? And there's chemicals floating around it. And we somehow forget that there's this entire body that's connected to it, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you know, and your audience knows, like everything in the body can affect the nervous system, right? So the gastrointestinal tract and changes in the microbiome affect the nervous system. Well, look at just, if you stand back and think about what are mold toxins, where do we get penicillin from? Mold. Mold toxins are inherently antimicrobial. Mm-hmm. They actually act as antibiotics. And when you look at the microbiomes of these kids, one of the things you see is that their microbiome is just a complete mess. Mm. Low lactobacilli, low bifidobacters, all the good bacteria, and then funky stuff just growing out like they're having a party. Mm-hmm. So you get the changes in the microbiome. You get changes in the gastrointestinal tract, you get leaky gut, you get gut inflammation. So the entire gastrointestinal tract just becomes a big hot mess. Mm-hmm. And through that leaky gut, you start getting leaky brain. So all of this permeability starts allowing inflammation and the entrance of all of these things that should not be in the nervous system. And that inflammatory response in of itself can present as anxiety. Sometimes it could present as attention problems, just because the nervous system and these neurons and brain cells are not meant to be in that inflammatory state, right? And that's just the gastrointestinal tract, and this is kind of the simple version of it.
Yeah.
Then we get the mitochondria. What drives the brain cells' activity?
The glucose.
Glucose and ultimately the mitochondria, right?
Yeah, mitochondria, yeah.
So the mitochondria take glucose and protein and fats, and then they're the little generators, they spit out ATP. Yeah. Without ATP, our brain cells can't function. So all of this fancy signaling that takes place and all the cells talking to each other, that just doesn't happen out of nowhere, right? It's a heavy energy dependent state. One of the things that mitochondria, or one of the things that mold toxins are awesome at, as we touched on, is killing that life force. Mm. They I don't want to say they shut down, because they shut down the mitochondria, we'd be dead.
Right.
But they actually can compromise the mitochondrial function. So there's you remember the I Love Lucy episode where there's that conveyor belt?
In the, assembly line kind of?
Yeah. So the mitochondria are similar, right? You take one thing and then you tack on a few other things, and then ultimately you get, voila, this ATP. Mm-hmm. That entire conveyor belt of transformation to ATP energy actually gets mucked up. And ultimately, that reduced life force, that low vitality, is because the mitochondrial function has been compromised. When you get that, all of a sudden, the neurons themselves start acting weird, where the signaling, cell-to-cell signaling, starts getting compromised. And the state of brain fog is really the best way to think about it. Mm. You get this weird state of brain fog where memory is just not clear, you can't think clearly, processing gets messed up. So a lot of these kids, like for instance, one very interesting telltale sign is the kid's ability to process math concepts is messed up. And a lot of parents are like, God, why is my kid just not learning math? Like, we've gone over this 1,000 times. Yeah. And it's not because your kid is trying to be a pain in the butt. It's because literally their brain's cell-to-cell communication is being compromised. They're having some weird state of brain fog, and when you've got a nasty state of brain fog, how the hell are you going to learn? Yeah. Right?
Yeah, it's incredible to think, because I know exactly what that feels like. The not being able to process, because it's just the hardest. It's like a dissociative brain fog that you feel. It's just like a cloud over the way that you think and can't even recall words. I can feel for the child who's sitting there and not being able to pick up those math concepts. So you're saying this is because the mold toxins are messing up that chain to create ATP. So mitochondria is not functioning the way it should. We're not getting enough energy. And that's the life force you're saying,
Yeah.
where people just, their energy is sort of on low and they're dragging and they're pale and you can just tell who's not doing very well. Now, when it comes to those mold toxins, one thing I learned is that there's a genetic component for how we're affected by mold. So could it be possible that if there's a family of 4 or 5, that only one of the kids is sick, and it can become elusive saying, okay, my one kid is sick, but my other one, it can't be something in the house. Do we find that families have a hard time believing that it could be something in the home like mold?
100%. 100%. And, sometimes there's one kid that's really falling apart or struggling, severe ADHD, learning problems, growth problems, whatever. You've got another kid that isn't in that horrible state, but that's the kid that got a few ear infections in 1 year, which we call normal, right? And it's like, 1 or 2 ear infections, what's the big deal? Except like in my practice, if a kid gets 1 ear infection in 1 year, that for me is like, what the hell is going on? If they got 2 ear infections, then it's like, all right, we're digging into everything going on, because in our society, we've come to normalize these things that, you get a pneumonia, you get an ear infection, you get this, you get that, we'll just throw some antibiotics, end the story. And yes, sometimes my daughter this last year got an ear infection, and it was the only ear infection she's had in her entire lifetime, and she recovered actually quite quickly from that. But it's these little things where, this kid has asthma, this kid has allergies, this kid has a learning problem. Mom has some brain fog where she is starting at the age of 35 to forget stuff, right? So sometimes it's subtle things where once you start standing back, you're like, God, there is weirdness there, even though mom's like, I just got brain fog because I've got 3 kids and I've been chasing after them.
Right.
We normalize it.
Yeah. And that's funny, right? Because the normal doesn't mean healthy.
No.
Right? And I can picture it. Mom going, okay, I have a lot on my plate and I have brain fog. And the kid just having ear infections and, okay, now he has bronchitis, but let's just give him antibiotics. We sort of don't ask the question, what's happening? Why does this keep happening?
Yeah.
You just had an ear infection, 3 months later it's bronchitis. Now it's gotten better, but now there's a cough. It could be something in the home. So parents out there, they might be going, okay, my kid might be exposed to mold. What do they do? And can they get tested for mold? How do we see that, one, the child is exposed to mold? And then what's the next step? So, I mean, I know you're not going in their home and tearing the floorboards apart. Is there anything that parents should look for when they're wanting to do something with their home?
So I think the first step is to just take a step back, right? And for them to start piecing things together. Because a lot of the families I talk to, they're like, we actually do have that water stain there. And when it does rain, we do get a little leak by that window. So a lot of times families, when I talk to them, they start noticing like, last year we did actually have that leak, or this happened. So as families stand back and they're like, what, that kind of sounds like us. That's when you then take the next step to say, well, gosh, maybe there is something going on. Now, a lot of families will come to me and say, well, we already tested our house. We don't have mold. And where that comes from is current mold inspectors are trained to look for horrendous, catastrophic, you can go sue your builder or landlord or, go take someone to court and do things to them, right? They're looking for that kind of standard of, your ceiling is about to collapse. Turns out that you don't need your ceiling to collapse to have enough exposure to these toxins over time to ultimately cause health problems. And that is where, if you've had your home tested and the inspector said, I don't see anything, that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't lesser amounts of mold that could still be a problem. A simple way to check is there are these ERMI tests where you basically, there's several companies out there that you can basically just buy it for $200, $300, and you just dust your house and you send it off. There's also an organization called ISEAI.org, International Society for Environmental Medicine or something like that.
Yeah.
I can never, I've tried so many times to remember.
Acronym is good enough.
Yeah. ISEI.org, they actually have a list of, experts that can help guide that. But, by having awareness and starting to put the pieces together, that's where people can say, like, gosh, maybe this is us. And maybe this is my kid.
Looking at the big picture, right? And I've noticed sometimes when you start bringing up mold and water stains, they oftentimes go, wait, that is when my son started getting blank, right when around the same time. And you start noticing, wow, that water leak that we had, this happened maybe 4 months later. And we start seeing how it unfolds. And it's so important. Mold is, what is it, like 1 in 2 homes or something have mold exposure or have water damage. It's wild to think that, whoa, okay, the home that I just moved into may have water damage. And in many ways, there should be a test where we can go in the home. And when we buy a home, we go, okay, let's just do a full checkup before I buy the home. I want to make sure this doesn't have mold because I'm trying to have a family here.
Yeah.
And I want a healthy family.
Yeah.
So early before we got on air, you said mold is really the thing that breaks the camel's back. That's the straw. What is brewing before that? What are the things that our children are exposed to, whether dietary or lifestyle, and other environmental stuff? What's brewing before that really creates that space for them? When mold comes, it just creates havoc.
Yeah. So, a lot of people, I think along the same lines ask, why the hell is this conversation coming up? Like, why, mold has been there forever, right? We've lived with mold. Like, why is this dude, coming and talking about it now? So there's a few things. First, it's not just mold. As you said, mold, I see, is the thing that tips the system over. When you add, glyphosates, and pesticides, and by themselves, a little bit of glyphosate exposure, not a huge deal because the body can handle it. Then you add some plastics to the mix, and the body can handle it. And you add, a few other environmental toxins, a little mercury from the tuna you ate. And, the body has this incredible ability to maintain its integrity and health. And it has the incredible ability to detoxify. And it will just keep rebalancing itself and pumping these toxins out and just clearing things out. But it can only do that to a certain point. All of these exposures over time reduce that capacity to handle the toxins. And I look at mold exposure as the gorilla that comes and sits in the back of your car, and the car was already a little out of tune, right? The suspension was a little off, the tires were not in perfect shape, and now this 2-ton beast comes and sits in the car, and all of a sudden, the tires pop, the suspension breaks, the transmission fails. That's what mold exposure does. And to put it in context, we worry about pesticides, glyphosates in our food supply, right? You want to eat organic because you want to avoid this stuff because it's probably not a good idea, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine you live next to a farm, right? So 20 feet away from you is a farm, and every day they're spraying glyphosates on that farm, and you're living X number of feet away from it, and every time you open your window, wafts of these chemicals drift into your living space, and you inhale them, you absorb them through skin and everything else. The exponential increase in that toxic exposure is similar to living in a space where there's mold, because these molds are constantly dumping these toxins out into the environment. And the thing that spooks me out as a pediatrician is you and I, our body's ability to handle toxins is significantly different than a 1 or 2-year-old's, right? These little people's ability to detoxify and handle stuff is significantly less. And my concern is mostly for the little people, even though it can harm, older kids and adults.
Because their system is just being trained and developing, and all of a sudden there's this in the food, this in the home, right? This in the environment all around, right? Like you said, if we're living by a farm, for example. And that builds up in the system. Yeah. You mentioned something about buffering capacity. What is buffering capacity?
Buffering capacity is, take your computer, right? And let's say you've got a little bit of an older computer. You can open up a bunch of apps and your computer is running fine, right? You keep opening up apps and it's still fine. It's getting a little sticky, but it's still fine. And then you open up that one app and all of a sudden, boom, it just freezes and shuts down. Yeah. The human body is similar. It has this capacity to buffer. So like you can keep adding load and it's fine and it's fine and it's fine. And then all of a sudden there's that one thing that just pushes it beyond its capacity and then it freezes, it shuts down. That's essentially the buffering capacity, the capacity to handle stress, whether that stress is a chemical, an infection, or whatever else, and it can handle it up to a certain point based on our genetics, and then it can't handle it anymore.
All right, let me tell you something. Element has been part of my life for about a year now because you know that I'm working out, sweating, and using the sauna. That's when I started using it because I found myself really dehydrated after. But now I use it all the time. Because I have a reverse osmosis filter, it's taken out all of the minerals, all the nasty, but all the minerals and electrolytes out. So I need to replenish them. Now, when it comes to Element, I got my favorite flavors. I love the citrus, I love the orange, I love the raspberry. You know I love the chocolate, and they came out with the caramel one where now I'm making my electrolyte-rich hot chocolate. But what is it? It's a science-backed electrolyte ratio formula with 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, 60 milligrams of magnesium, no sugar, no artificial coloring, artificial flavors, artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers. It's awesome. And I'll say this, the natural flavors are coming from foods, spices, nothing synthetic. Element is formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and perfectly suited for your lifestyle following a keto, low carb, paleo, whatever you're doing. Now, it's super important to replenish those electrolytes because when we're depleted in them, we experience things like headaches, muscle spasm, fatigue, sleeplessness, and other common symptoms of this deficiency. Now, I felt so much better implementing Element, especially after my saunas, but now just day to day. And I know that I'm sustaining my electrolyte ratios. I know that I'm getting enough minerals for my body to be functioning at a high level. So right now, Element is offering you, the Heal Thyself listener, a free sample pack with purchase. You're gonna get 8 single-serving packets free with any Element order. Now, this is a great way to try all your 8 flavors or share Element with a friend. Now get yours at drinkelement.com/DRG. The deal is only available through the link. You must go to drink, D-R-I-N-K, element, L-M-N-T.com/DRG. They offer no questions asked refunds. If you don't like it, it's totally risk-free. They'll give you your money back and you ain't got nothing to lose. It's really amazing stuff. Check it out, especially if you're sweating day to day. You gotta replenish those minerals and electrolytes. Try it out. So the insults over and over and over, we're like, oh, I'm robust, I'm fine, I can go through it. And then all of a sudden, that one insult or that 1 week of insults or that 1 year of insults just break everything down. It's incredible. What are some of the major insults? What are the really big 5 insults that children are being exposed to that is reducing their buffering capacity? And then they're exposed to that gorilla and then it breaks.
I think diet is obviously one, right? So if the child is eating tons of sugar and processed foods and just low nutritional value foods, like that's one thing that'll deplete. We've talked about, environmental exposures. So, the glyphosates and the chemicals. And again, none of them by themselves are the problem. It's when you start kind of loading all of that up cumulatively. We've had families where a kid was doing absolutely fine, antibiotic comes in, and then boom, all of a sudden they're like, what the hell happened? My kid has this horrendous case of eczema after one antibiotic. Or we've had families where all of a sudden autism appeared out of nowhere after one antibiotic. Inoculations. So I know this is a big controversial area, but what I perceive in terms of when children ultimately get some kind of reaction or injury from a vaccine is the vaccine is the thing that potentially tipped the child's system over. In these discussions, one of the things that we don't talk about is what was happening in that child's system to begin with that made them have the vulnerability for this biologic agent to cause them to tip over. And those are the big ones
Those
that
are
I
the
can
big
think
ones.
of.
And so all of them are adding some sort of insult, and then it's something like, oh, we moved into a new home. Now my child is developing all of these issues. They're having issues at school, they're getting pneumonia or bronchitis, and look at their skin, now they have eczema. That's really tipping it over.
Yeah.
It's incredible to think. Now, you mentioned about gut health, and I want to talk about it because so many kids are suffering with issues younger. I mean, like food intolerances was not something that happened when I was a kid, and maybe things changed. Have you seen the food system change from when you started practicing till now?
Yeah, yeah. And absolutely. I mean, we know that our food supply has changed. And between the genetic modifications that have been introduced, I mean, a lot of foods, even organic, ultimately have some pesticide residue. There are so many things that have changed in the food supply. And a lot of families will say, like, God, you know, I've got all of these intolerances. I go to Europe, and all of a sudden I'm eating every baguette and everything, and it's not a problem. So absolutely the food supply has changed. But, you know, there's also then the antibiotics that are in our food supply, and they're given to the animals, and we eat the chickens and whatever, and we get the antibiotics. And, you know, when you stand back, you see that we've kind of created this perfect storm of things where antibiotic in the food supply by itself, not a problem, right? The changes that we've introduced into some of our, you know, genetic modifications by themselves are not a problem. But then you add all of these things, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, yeah, it makes sense.
Wow. And we think about how that food affects the system as a whole. But when it comes to the gut now, and we mentioned antibiotics, necessary in so many ways, are we overprescribing? And what's happening with that overprescription? Is it leading to issues with the gut, which is leading to issues with other diseases for children? What is your opinion or your take on that?
They are being overutilized, I think is the better way.
Overutilized.
You know, in a lot of communities, people expect to get antibiotics, right? My kid has a cough. They go into the doctor. He's been coughing for 3 days. Can you give me an antibiotic? My kid's ear is hurting. Give me an antibiotic. In a lot of communities, people are just automatically like, well, antibiotic will fix my kid quick. I've got to go back to work, or my kid is crying. I want a quick fix. There are a lot of physicians that don't want to prescribe them, but almost feel pressured to prescribe them because they don't have any other option, right? And when your hands are tied and all you know is, well, I've got a cough medication that may or may not work, and God, I don't know what else to do for this kid, but I can write a prescription for an antibiotic. The doctor wants to do something to help. So they'll prescribe the antibiotic. And that is part of where this problem has come from. And all of these antibiotics are obviously eroding the microbiome, which is then impacting the gut health, which is then impacting the human's health. Right?
Yeah, it's like a chain reaction, especially when it's being overutilized. And I get it from the doctor's side. The decisions we're making are based on, I really want to help this kid, and I know that this will help the earache. You know, we had a long time ago, a pediatrician say, hey, look, we do this for a few days, see if it gets better, continue it a few more days, probably will get better, and if not, we do an antibiotic, you know? But it has to be a cost-benefit thing, right? And changing the paradigm of the quick fix. And really, what's the root of it? Why is my kid getting bronchitis, right? What's in the home? What's experienced in the home? And how is it affecting the body? When it comes to mold, as we tie that part back in again, and children have behavioral issues, can it be, in your research, has it caused any other diseases outside of the behavioral? Has it been connected to childhood cancers? Has it been connected to autoimmune disease in children, more serious diseases?
I think that the honest answer is we don't know. The honest answer is we don't know. It terrifies me to think about all of the things that it is potentially causing. What is disturbing is how little information and research and understanding we have around these things. I'll give you an example. Inflammatory bowel disease. There's a very weird scenario where children between 2 to 3 years and 4 to 5 years of age develop inflammatory bowel disease, which is very, 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 very rare. at least in the handful of kids that I've seen, that I've taken care of, where the families have come to me and they're like, what the hell is happening to my kid? When you start really getting into their gastrointestinal tract and their microbiome, and you do immunological testing against these molds, all of a sudden you see this show up. I don't think we can truly comprehend the scope of challenges and health problems that are coming up from these exposures, because we have yet to even develop models to start looking at them. I'll give you another example. Autism. Like, no one really knows what the hell causes autism, right? There's research coming up saying there's probably an environmental factor, but no one has actually gotten to a place of understanding. Now, I'm doing a presentation in 2 months to one of these autism medical communities. And there's a lot of weird things about these children with autism that don't make sense. Like, the mother's immune system is overactive while she's pregnant. Parents have a disproportionately higher rate of allergies in the child's family, immediate family. These children have weird cases of neuroplasticity. These kids have 200 to 300% increased risks of inflammatory bowel disease. These kids have mitochondrial errors. These kids have abnormal immune responses. They have oxidative stress. Like, you go on and on and on and on, and that's what I'm doing in this presentation. Literally, there's like 22, I think, points that are weird physiological findings that are documented in the sciences about these children with autism. And guess what? Every single one of those things has also scientifically been shown to be caused by mold exposure. Now, does that mean that mold exposure causes autism? We have no idea. And I'm certainly not here to say, yes, in every case, this is that. But what this is to say is how archaic we are in our understanding. It's like, the Flintstones, they were like doing their little kick-foot car.
Yeah.
That's really where we are.
Wow.
That's really where we are. That's how poor our medical understanding and research and medical understanding of mold and the connection to these diseases are. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason for that, I believe, is one, we have all of these other exposures, and now mold is causing illness. We have changes in our building science, and the way homes are being built is causing a problem. It's also obscenely hard to actually make that connection, because some of the home testing methodologies don't work very well. So you can do a test and you could miss mold in your house. The testing we have to test kids in particular, frankly, suck. Like, there are times I will literally have to order 3 different tests from 3 different companies, and one of those 3 will all of a sudden light up, and then the family tests, and it's like, oh my God, we've got to get out of this house because it's so bad. So there's so many issues with ultimately how we can diagnose and find the mold and connect it that's hindering our ability to move forward.
Wow. To think about how far back we are in the research with something that can be so ubiquitous, for one, but it's just a big blanket on so many things that could be implicated. And when I think about what you just said, the autism and all those 22 points connected to mold, right? And how much of a driver in autism is mold? Maybe 1%, maybe 99%, or somewhere in between. So I hope over the years, and as I get older, we have a deeper understanding, so we can understand. And you mentioned about the buildings being built differently. I remember learning, I think it was buildings before maybe the 50s or the 40s are more robust and better well-equipped to not grow mold, but the new cookie-cutter ones, the materials we're using, right? The fast buildings that we have, those apartment complexes that are just coming up and built in less than 6-7 months, their materials are so porous and they invite in mold so easily. All you need is one toilet to leak or like one sink to leak. So it's no joke. If there's a water issue, it's got to be remediated fast. All of us, I was under the impression, I remember I had in college a water main break, and they had the person come in and they go, okay, the ceiling's not falling off, and they did an air sample. You go, no mold, you're fine. But I didn't feel good in that place, I remember. And how many parents are in the same boat? Wow, we had a water issue, but they fixed it. Did they really fix it? And is your son or your daughter doing really well, or can they be better? So beautiful, beautiful. I love that, the work that you're doing, connecting the mold to pediatrics. It's essential. Is there anything in your heart, anything that you want to say to the parents out there, anything that you want to bring up, anything that we haven't spoken about?
Well, I want to clarify one thing. First, depending on the region, like Southern California, I'd say 1 in 10 homes have mold. What breaks my heart is if you have flooding, so flood-prone areas, and sadly now California is becoming flood-prone.
Right.
If you have flooding with more than 2 or 3 feet of water, that's where 1 in 2 homes can have mold.
1 in 2 homes with the flooding.
So it's still frequent enough to the point where it deserves attention. If there's anything for me to leave the audience with, is the reason why I'm here and the reason why I'm doing this work and the reason why we're taking this time to have this conversation is not to create alarm. It's not to create fear. It's to create awareness, because so many people are in a place where they're like, what the hell is happening, right? Mm-hmm. Why is my kid getting sick so much? Why does my poor kid struggle to learn? And this is the part that breaks my heart, because a lot of kids are losing the ability to thrive. They're losing their ability to be these happy, beautiful people in the world that can, thrive and succeed. And a lot of parents are like, why is my kid stuck? Why is my kid suffering?
Yeah.
And by having this discussion, by having this awareness, we can get to a place where say, maybe this is me. It's not to say mold is causing every problem for every person, right? It's not to say every case of eczema, asthma, ADHD, whatever is mold. By no means, absolutely not. But when we have this discussion and when people start asking the questions and they're like, oh my God, yeah, I've had chronic fatigue. God, I'm 35 years old and I'm starting to forget everything. And yeah, my kid has attention problems. As we start having this awareness, then comes like, oh my God, maybe this is happening to us. And the coolest part of this is it's completely treatable. I believe it's pretty much completely reversible, which is different than other diseases, right? You can detox this. It takes work. It's a pain in the butt. It takes some money, but it can be completely restored. And if we get smart enough, it's completely preventable. And I can't begin to imagine how many lives we can help in the future if we get to a place where we start saying, like, God, we had a leak. Let's figure out if there's something there. And by having these discussions and awareness and prevention and so forth, we can really change so many people's lives.
It's incredible to think about, right? Yeah. Just how powerful just awareness from the get-go can be towards healing. And what a thing to hear that it's reversible, that it's not something we'd suffer with all our lives. And we can see a doctor who's trained in it and in our town and really start healing ourselves and our children, really, in the home and whatever else is happening. It's just incredible to hear that, hopefully this is where we're going in science. Yeah. Hopefully there's more education. Hopefully it's out there where we go, wait a minute, I'm hearing about this, but this is sticking out, the mold in my home. This is where it's happening. So how do people viewing, listening, if they want to reach out to you, how do they find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Holistic Kids, so WHOLISTIC Kids. They can go to our website, also Holistic Kids. And those are some of the ways for them to find me.
Very cool. Listen, Doc, if you don't have a book out, we need to have the mold book with a kid on front. I'm waiting on that, all right? And I want the first autographed copy.
You got it.
It's a pleasure to have you here. What a gift for you to be talking about this, because not enough doctors are, not enough pediatricians are. And to think how many lives and families you're saving is incredible. Even by listening, you've already sparked a light bulb for people, and that's beautiful. I hope everyone just really resonated and asking questions. That's the number one thing. What's going on? I'm asking questions. Thank you for your work, Doc.
Of course. And, You know, the reason why I do this is the transformation that I've seen in the kids. Kid who couldn't focus is now killing it in the class.
Yeah.
The kid who was weak and just didn't want to move and just having big tantrums, a year later is doing intramural sports and killing it, and like just a completely different person. And the beautiful transformations that are possible, and this is the cool part of this, the transformations that are possible where literally one human being that was sickly and tired and wiped out and irritable and whatever else transforms into this vital person who is just shining and beaming is literally the most beautiful thing you can possibly imagine. And that's really what this is about. There's so much beauty and light that can come into this world if we have this discussion and ultimately figure out how to resolve it.
Powerful stuff, man. Everyone go check out his website, check out his Instagram, follow if you have kids. If you don't have kids, follow, learn more. Thank you so much, Doc.
Thank you.
Let me tell you something. This Ozempic Wegovy trend has been crazy. It's gone viral. All the celebrities are using this new miracle weight loss drug, but is it real? Is it safe? Is it good? So apparently Hollywood and longevity docs are going crazy over this, right? You type in the name and you look at the recent news and you're gonna see all the celebs talking about this new miracle weight loss drug. We got Kim K talking about it, how she fit into her dress for the Met Gala because she loved using it, and Elon Musk raves about it. But while there's other celebs, they ain't liking it, right? Someone like Chelsea Handler, reality TV stars are calling it weird and irresponsible. Okay, but let's go into it. Have you heard of it? Ozempic is an FDA-approved prescription medication taken by injection. You put it in your thigh, you put it in your stomach, you put it in your arm. And it is primarily used for diabetes, but it's become more popular for its off-label use, fat loss. Ozempic is a glucagon-like peptide 1. It's a GLP-1 receptor agonist, and it's indicated as semaglutide. And it reduces blood sugar through a mechanism where it stimulates insulin secretion and lowers glucagon, which works the opposite way of insulin. And thus, when you're using it and your blood glucose is high, insulin secretion is stimulated and glucagon secretion is inhibited, right? So your blood sugar is going down, you're losing weight. The mechanism of the blood glucose lowering also involves a minor delay in gastric emptying, right? So you're feeling more full longer. Now your insulin is up, your appetite is reduced, and it's leading to weight loss. Some studies show that you can lose up to 14.9% of weight. That's a lot. Now, as per the package insert, we learn a little bit more about this drug. The way they market it is as an adjunct to diet and exercise to improve glycemic control in adults with type 2 diabetes. This is who it's made for. And to reduce the risk of major adverse cardiovascular events in adults with type 2 diabetes, again, who it's made for. But the off-label weight loss usage has become so popular that there's actually been a shortage of the drug. So the people who are suffering with really high blood sugar, type 2 diabetes, are not able to get the medication, putting them in a dangerous place, actually. So we learn a little bit more about this weight loss solution. Do I particularly like it? No, because there's some concerns. Aside from the shortages for diabetics not getting medication, there are some risks. Remember, for any medication, it's not ever a clear go. There's always a trade-off with the body. And we call them side effects, but they're just effects that the drug company can't market. So in rodent studies, what we saw was that Ozempic, semaglutide, causes thyroid cancer. Now, we don't know what happens to humans just yet, but in animals, we see that. And there are some warnings for the drug. Although some of them may be on the lower end, like pancreatitis, it is a risk under 1%. Now, diabetic retinopathy is a complication that we see with this drug. Now, it's a leading cause of preventable blindness. Found in folks who have diabetes, about 3 to 8% of people are suffering with this complication. What else? Hypoglycemia, especially in people who are utilizing insulin as well with it. We also see the risk of acute kidney injury, right? You gotta monitor your renal function, especially in patients who have renal impairment. We also see hypersensitivity reactions. Some serious ones like anaphylaxis or angioedema have been reported in people using Ozempic. Acute gallbladder disease is also seen. So if you're suspected to have gallbladder issues, you gotta make sure you're being very careful if you're utilizing this and speaking to your doctor. Now, what are the most common side effects we're seeing? About 32 to 36% of people who use Ozempic have gastrointestinal issues. 15 to 20% of those people are experiencing nausea, 5 to 9% are experiencing vomiting, 8.5 to 8.8% are experiencing diarrhea, 5.7 to 7.3 abdominal pain, and about 3 to 5% constipation. But actually the side effect that has been most popularized, and if you type in the hashtag Ozempic face on TikTok, you're gonna see over 5 million posts on Ozempic face. That is the fiery trend right now. But what is Ozempic face? It's just a byproduct of really rapid weight loss. And what's happening is the face is becoming more gaunt, more sagging of the skin, more wrinkling, and it looks like you're aging. And it's because you're losing that subcutaneous fat really fast. Our bodies are made really in a healthy way to lose about 1 to 2 pounds per week. But with something like Ozempic, you can be losing 8 to 12 pounds a week. So as a result, we're getting more sagging skin, loose skin, more gaunt look, and the byproduct being the Ozempic face, quote unquote. Now, can it be reversible? Not fully, actually. Some of the solutions for this would be fillers, skin tightening, and plastic surgery. So do I like it? No, not necessarily. Actually, not at all. I think this medication is better used for people who have type 2 diabetes. With that said, I think anyone with type 2 diabetes needs really, really strong education on how to control and manage their blood sugar, lifestyle changes. It goes a lot deeper. This medication isn't a root healing for anyone. Now, the other side of it is when people get off of it, a lot of people are gaining the weight back. It's a short-term solution that puts you at risk for some potentially serious adverse effects. So if it's something that you want to do to lose weight in a healthy way, I'm going to highly suggest, I had amazing guests to talk about this. Sean Stevenson on episode 184, Lauren Roxburgh on episode 180, and Don Saladino on episode 191. They're going to give you the foundations from the nutrition to the exercise to even the deeper stuff like hydration and fascia, how to properly begin losing weight sustainably long-term instead of moving to something like an injectable, which is going to be short-term and puts you at risk for some serious stuff.